Maryam is an ethnographer who just recently graduated from Southern University with her PhD. She comes from Iran, where her family was politically persecuted, and Maryam survived, but her family was not so lucky. And I think as a child you emigrated to Sweden, or as a adolescent. Yeah,
actually as an adult.
As an adult. Okay. Yes, I had. Yeah. Maryam's research deals with questions of being a refugee and exile, and some of her research has also focused on Iran, but her PhD research focused on Estonian refugees.
Very nice introduction indeed. Yes, as Lina was saying, I'm an ethnographer. So I have one foot in ethnography and one foot in philosophy. So the talk I will give you today, it will be a bit about on the concept of memory and history, and why it is important to focus it in the context of refugees and exile. So most of us working with memories of refugees and memories in exile points at certain questions and certain contexts that we need kind of to investigate further. Why I ended up in the Estonian memories is a very long story, which I will tell you today. I will tell you two other tales, though. But yes, I have been following Estonian refugees, and one thing that fascinated me a lot above the memories was also the path of the memories over 70 years, which it actually has been in those cases. So, dears, for years the interest in memory studies has been increasing among all disciplines. So history, ethnography, sociology, obviously, most of us working with this, especially during these couple of years passing since the so-called new wave of refugees once again became the subject of interest for European politicians. Collecting and, or rather, refugees' memories have been focused in research as well as in cultural heritage sector once again. Collecting and displaying artifacts connected to refugees' memories has been one of the most popular subjects for exhibitions, among others, not only in Sweden, but actually all over Europe since 2015. In Sweden, the undertaking reveals an ambivalent relationship to the subject of refuge historically. Refugees of today are often compared to and put on display in combination with earlier so-called rescue actions of Second World War refugees, emphasizing reflections upon the self-understanding of the host country rather than refugees' experiences and memories of an escape. The ambivalence captured by such representations, in my understanding, underlines the urgency of going back to the grounds with, in the context of memory studies on refugees specifically, with the urgency of not only asking whose story we are telling, but also to consider what constitutes a lived memory space. What is we are really talking about when we are talking memory, and how history is defined within this. So what kind of history are we really searching? So in order to do this, I'm going to share actually two tales with you, but one tale. And since Lina already has revealed where the tale comes from, so I can tell you that it is a story that Enno told me a while ago. And then I will, at the end of the talk, I will share a second tale with you, which is based on a memory search here in Tartu, only a block away from where we are sitting. So I thought it could be fun, maybe. So this tale, this first tale, which we start with, it is not about any historical facts, rather about the dreaminess of memories, of the ambiguities, of the in-betweens, and how this kind of poetics of memory might trace another kind of history, which can be useful even for us as researchers. So, I can feel the sweet smell of the kitchen, the intense buzzing of the flies. An old farm's kitchen on the Estonian countryside. Hendrik is 9-year-old visiting his aunt. Her husband has been working for the former occupation regime. He has just been executed. Henrik's aunt tells him about it. But all he remembers is the flies. She said he had been executed and his body hasn't been returned to the family. But I remember the flies in the kitchen. Gently and serenely, this memory image captures the gap, and every day headed to the disaster, the one that hits and leaves it all behind. In the kitchen, the smell is still sweet, the flies still buzz, and the 9-year-old contemplates. The memory image is double-edged, and every day and its antithesis joined. The serenity in the eye of the storm. In between this serenity and that storm, a memory becomes alive. An experience of the unreal stands out against the backdrop of the stillness and the sweet smell of the kitchen. Hendrik himself doesn't remember the event, preceding and leaving behind this unreal reality. He doesn't recall the arrest and the execution, nor the tale of it. What he remembers is the flies and the sweet smell of the kitchen. In between the absence of the event and the concreteness of the flies, in between the oblivion and the recollected, the memory of experiencing a real unreality is captured. While recalling his memory image, Henrik is reminded of how the flies used to come back in his dreams. Another layer is added to these in-betweens. He tells, years ago, I decided to try to remember my dreams. You know, you can't force yourself to remember just as you're about to wake up, and then write the dreams down as soon as you're awake. It's kind of a torture, really. It was tough remembering the dreams just as you're about to wake up. One usually forgets the dreams as soon as one is awake. Later on, I wrote a short story based on those dreams, putting them all together. And there you have the flies. The story is called The Granny Knot, a knot hard to unknot. There are several dreams that I put together as a voyage. I named the protagonist the Seeker. He ends up in a little village and finds this little wooden farmhouse. That would be my aunt's house. He knocks on the door and finds it's open. The kitchen is filled of the intense buzz of the flies. The smell is sweet. The morning sun shines through the dusty windows. Across the yellow sandy countryside, he can see the hills of the manor. These are my memory images, Henrik says. I recall the buzz and the smell so very well. I'm not in Tallinn anymore, but in Virtsu. And it is during the wartime. There was a manor next to the farm, but it was burned down. It was an old wooden manor from 1917 with old linden trees. The trees are still there, but that's all I write. It's a memory that has remained. Do you still dream of the flies? I asked Henrik. Yes, oh yes. The flies come back in my dreams now and then. That's why I put them in the story. These are images from one of my dreams. So that was the time I was at my aunt's house. I remember it so much more clearly than the execution of her husband. Have you other memories of those days? I asked him again. No, I have the flies. I have the kitchen. That's all I have. I wrote the story back in 1966. 40 years has passed since the book, and now 67 years since I was at my aunt's house. In the memory image, the senses are tangible and concrete. The sweet smell and the buzz of the flies. The morning sun shining through the window and the sight of the manor through it. A wooden manor that is no more. The linden trees still standing, framing the absence. The memory image captures the tangibility of the senses and the sensation of an absence. It intertwines the dream and the experience. In the dream, memory blends the has-been of the manor with its no longer. In between the concreteness of the image and the abstraction of the dream, a lived experience emerges. In between the memory, the dream of the memory, and the memory of the memory 40 years later. Memory reads the surface of history, retells the story of a manor vanished and a war passed by. It captured tales of persecution and executions, yet the chronology has no bearing, the facts no saying. Rather, by intertwining different modes of being, of a memory, a dream, and the dream of a memory recaptured in fiction, remembrance allows the experience to emerge, to be sensed and grasped. In the intersections between the buzz of the flies and the words of the aunt, the concreteness and the intangibility, the senses and the absences, the memory of lived experience is brought to the fore. The lived experience of hearing about the execution in a farm's kitchen and the memory of it. So memory is actually by definition a being in between and through different layers of time and various spaces. Walter Benjamin argues that the past rather comes to life as images, flashing up, building temporary constellations in the now. The constellations memory produces in the moment of recognition and in the flash of an image intertwine different pathways, fragments, and layers of temporality into one flow. Hence, the memory image is rather an image of dialectics, a constant oscillation between various elements. The process of remembering, additionally, involves a constant montage of images by association. Memory searching for traces in stories, dreams, landscapes is not a linear process, producing clear-cut explanations. The act of remembrance rather searches for recognition of the lived experience of memory, of the has-been and of the ongoing in the encounters with the surrounding worlds. Memory's sense constantly surfaces their vision based more on optical tactility, connecting the seen to the unseen, allying one link to another by association. So maybe here in the middle I could tell you just first how we do search, how you can focus the search before I do conclude. So I won't bore you just with philosophy of the memory. So my point in this is that when we are actually taking part of memories, they don't really aim at tell us facts. They try to. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they don't. Yeah? Most of the time when we remember things, it can be by accident. It can be that you sense something that reminds you of something else. So the act of remembrance is often a searching for this kind of small traces of remembrance, what you can remember. The second tale here is about a boy. He is the grandchild, so this is you would say, third generation grandchild of an Estonian refugee who left the country back in 1944. The first time I met him, he showed me this kind of, collection of different things. Both his grandmother and his grandfather had died, and he had been interviewing them even before they passed away, but still he didn't know their complete story, for sure. He put puzzle, you would say, took all these kind of different small fragments of tales, letters, as you can see here, tried to search not only for the content, because he didn't always knew who was mentioned, the one being mentioned, who it was or not. So in this kind of middle land of knowing and not knowing enough, he tried to search for signs. So you see, for example, on the letter here, do you see something unusual with the envelope? The black line. So this is a letter of sorrow. When somebody has died, they send these letters with a black line around the envelope, where you could see, so already before you could open the letter, you could see that somebody has died. This was something that was quite upsetting, just getting it, So just arriving, the arriveness of the envelope told something. He combined the very same, this is from the very same day, the very same, he combined the story of the envelope, for example, with the story of this couple, young couple, and it is a very bad photo, I know. I'm very sorry about the blurring, the blurring of the side, but actually also our sides were blurred because he didn't knew anything about half of the persons on the photograph. Some of them he knew, some he didn't. Some stories he knew. It was from before the escape, and some afterwards. So we searched among them. We searched in his grandmother's diary, which was left. The diary written to the middle, some pages were wrapped out and were missing. He didn't know why. We did speculate. Some photos. He had been back to the farm where the grandmother was born and lived most of her youth, and searched in the ground, found pieces of porcelain, stones, things, and also the little doll. Do you see the little doll? Little porcelain doll was the treasure. It was, these were used back in the 20s to put in porridge, in Christmas porridge. So the one finding them would get married or I don't know, different kind of stories about them. But he had found it in the ground of the farm. The farm doesn't exist anymore. There is a new house on the farm, but in the ground he had found this one. And also next to it you can see a box, a little box, which is it's very dark photo, so maybe it's not really clear, with small pieces that his grandfather has left behind, hidden in a little cabinet, you know, with small bottoms of uniform, for example, small different pieces that some of them he could know the story of and some he couldn't. And this was his Estonian corner. As you can see, this so-called Estonian corner is a very paradoxical one. Yeah? You can see the paradoxes. What kind of paradoxes? You have a picture of President Pats, yeah? Next to a picture of Mayakovsky, of course. Which doesn't need to be an ambivalence, but it was, yeah? So he was interested both in Estonian languages and Russian languages. Poetry, of course, yeah? The family pictures, and in front of the family pictures, you have the small, small pieces of fragments that he had found in the ground. Do you see them? All the small pieces of porcelain, little handle to a mug, or the small stones. So, as Lina was saying, I followed people I was interviewing for quite a good while, doing different kind of activities together, really. But I'm going to only to tell about memory searches this time. So this was back in 2010, I think. 4 years later, we came here to Tartu. This is Riiatanav. I don't know if you recognize it or not. A little hidden place. If you go a block further from here, up to Riiatanav, and to the boys' school, which is upper, you can see the football plan on the back. In front of it and next to the street, there is this small garden with trees left. Yeah? There were a house, of course, where the football plan is today. The house burned down and vanished. His grandmother used to live in this house. So during one of our journeys back here to Estonia, he took me here, wanted to show me. And from this garden, he had told me before that one of her memories, that she looked up and she saw, I don't know, is it the same in English? Zeppelinare? What is it?
Hot air balloon.
What?
Is it like a hot air balloon?
Hot air balloon, but you know, not only hot air balloons, but this, you know, it's a name. Zeppelinare was this kind of hot air balloon, the very first of them that were quite long, you know. They look very sci-fi. Back in 1920s, she was standing in this garden, looking up and seeing one of these flying, you know. So we went back, and on this, what would you say? What would you call them? You know, the... Yeah, sorry? Gates, yeah? Gate stones. You can see the mark of his grandfather's company. But also as kind of a hidden place, you know. So he was telling me, no, there are not so many people actually knowing about this, or what this is, or maybe they wonder why somebody has left a little bit of a garden here, you know, but it's standing. And also here, we were searching for small pieces left, traces, irons. We decided not to take this one with us because it was too heavy to fly with. And yeah, and we were discussing whether it was going to vanish soon or not, since it's kind of overgrown and doesn't feel the purpose really. It's kind of misplaced in the place. So you see, in this kind of memories search, you have the kind of memory searching for identities and searching for kind of meanings, and trying to explain whether kind of an Estonian identity is built with help of these memories. But also there is this other side, the other side of things that we as researchers might put aside and think of as not saying anything, you know. The searches that are kind of meaningless, really, or ambiguities or ambivalences, like in this one. So, just not to bore you altogether, I just will make a little conclusions here that this in-betweenness, in my understanding, between a story, a place, something else, so the state of being in between all of these is a state of memory and must be considered as such. It's important. What memory does is juxtaposing events and items taken out of their previous contexts, yet aligned in new montage. Remembrance underlines the gaps and the ambivalences. It confirms and disclaims in one. It offers associative pathways, leading, by association, like here, from one thing to another, from a letter to photography to a diary to a place, Remembering is a process of collecting and recollecting, of arranging ever new constellations with the new findings, of returns to the same fragments again and again, in memory, in a dream, in a novel, placing experience between life, dream, and fantasy. Memories witness history and underline its urgency, and at the same time dispute the testimony they are bearing witness to by adding uncertainty. And this uncertainty is actually what also Bible was talking about, but the movement, what Astrid L. calls the movement in memory, that memory never stands still, it always moves. So in order to be able to move, you need this little bit of uncertainty to move on to something else, to search for something new. Through lived experience, memories embodies the resonances between authenticity, experience, and fantasy. This is not so much a result of their questionable role as witnesses of history, but rather as an outcome of the act of remembrance and the movement it generates by searching and tracing. Memories roaming in the gaps between the has-been and the ongoing now, dream and tangibility, emerges in the lived experience of remembrance and awareness of the state of in-betweenness, in memory and its constant movement. Exilic existence is the existence that experiences the movement from its moving, claims the philosopher Marcia Sakavalkante-Shubak. To conceive exilic existence from its moving while moving means to conceive it in its intensity and the fragility of the moving while moving. Memory's tracing and searching illuminates a memory poetics of the meanwhile and the in-between, which refuses historical closures, but rather aims at sharing the experience of the fragility and intensity of the experience of the movement. The position of in-betweenness appears in stories of escape and exile, not as a state of in-between home and away, past and present, rather as an ongoing space-making process between different modes and layers of memory. This is a process aware of the constant changes in the understandings of history and personal experience, intertwining these new interpretations with embodied memory and thereby constantly adding new layers of experience to it. So, just a little tale again, but this is the very, very last one. Back in 2015, where a huge amount of refugees were arriving to Sweden, a special issue of a radio podcast focusing on literature in Sweden was made, which has a title of, or not real title, but it was focusing on refugees. During this podcast, the commentator, considering refugees as the future authors of their lives, requested them to try to remember the details, since the story lies in the details. So remember how you felt. Have you had a shower? Have you had a change of clothes? How does it feel really? Write it down, save it, collect it for the future to come. But dears, as you can see here as well, memories of an escape don't tell a single story. They don't follow a path of logic. They can try to and put you one story, and the next day they can change it. They don't aim for a certain destination. Their path were rather being the path of associations, of the movement and the searching. So let us both maybe not reduce these stories to single stories exhibited and displayed, but also make room for a history of non-closures, which these are telling about. Thank you so much. I hope I haven't bored you too much this one. Thank you.